All right, Taylor Yowzy, this one's for you. Hey, anybody else that watches this, great too. I think it's a cool story. Happened to my dad and my mom, mostly my dad, a number of years ago at a place called No Name Lake in Washington State. They live in Spokane. It's about, I don't know, 45 minutes or so from their house, um, maybe an hour. But they like to go up there uh, to camp out just a little bit. Hardly anybody camps up there, or at least used to. It's a small little lake. It's a small little campground. I've been up there with them. Went up there one time for a few days when I got back from my mission, and they said, "Hey, let's go camping up to No Name Lake," and we would take our dog up there and just let him run around, and it was fun. It's a nice little, very peaceful place. So this story though has to do with uh, the this was the site of a near fatal encounter, like I wrote on here. My dad uh, could have easily died, and so what was it? What was it that caused that? Uh, I like to call it the Bigfoot at No Name Lake story, but who knows? It makes it interesting to say that, though. So, like I said, Spokane is about, well, it says it's 58 miles, the lake is from Spokane. You can see the elevation. The lake is not big, 17 and basically 17 and a half acres. But it is fairly deep, reaches depths of about 30 feet. It's a very serene, nice place, uh, very pretty surroundings. And there's a bunch of lakes, small lakes in that area around No Name Lake. So you could go to any number of lakes in that region, but No Name Lake just happened to be the place my parents liked to visit. So here are some pictures of it. Like I said, it's very small, and they don't allow anything motorized on the lake, so you can go fishing. You can fish from the shore. You can fish, take a raft or a rowboat out there, and a canoe and fish, but nothing motorized. You can get from one end of the lake to the other pretty darn fast, and but it's a place where you see a little bit of wildlife sometimes. You'll see bald eagles, nests up in the trees and so forth. But there's one picture. Here's another from the shore. Again, you can see very green, a lot of pine trees. That's where this is the area I grew up in, and a fun place to go. Another picture here, also from the shore. So this is not my parents' exact uh, their motorhome, but this is one exactly like it. And uh, the American Clipper. This is the exact same model they used to have, and we used to kind of rag them about it. My dad bought it. It was already used, and it was kind of breaking down all the time and stuff. But they loved it. They'd just get in the thing and go. With its 4 or 5 miles a gallon, I think, that it would get, and they'd take the dog and just go camping for a few days. So this is where some of the story takes place. Remember this. Of course, they would sleep up above the driver and passenger seat, right? And if you're claustrophobic, you don't like these type of campers, because where you sleep there up above the driver and passenger seats it's you're sleeping and your face is like, it seems like it's 4 or 5 inches from the ceiling. If you wake up kind of with a start, you whack your head on the ceiling. But anyway, so this is the type of camper they had, and I'm going to show you now a couple pictures of the campground. When you drive in, the campground is very small. I would say it's probably, I mean, just from my memory, it's probably like maybe half the size of a football field. You drive in from one side, and I can't remember if it's in north, south, east, or west, but you drive. Let's just say you drive in from the south, and off to the west and the north is just shrubs and trees and foliage. Off to the east is the same thing, except for a little pathway that leads down to the lake. So it's a small campground. Like I said, not many people camp there, especially during the week. On the weekends, you might get a few more, but it's all just tent camping, or if you pull a motorhome in. But uh, Anyway, when my parents went there, and this must be, I'm telling the story in 2022, it must be about 2015, or excuse me, probably 2010 that this happened. So it's been 10 or 12 years. They go into the campground on a weekday. It's like a Tuesday, and there were only two other people in the campground at the time. And my dad talked to them. It was a young couple with a couple little kids, and they said, yeah, our kids have never been camping before. They wanted to go camping, so we told them, yeah, we'll go camping for a night, here at the lake. And so they were in a tent, and then a ways over from them was an older guy just by himself in a tent. And so there were two other parties, if you will, in the campground, and then my parents in the motorhome. And none of them were extremely close to each other. They weren't, the people weren't camped right next to each other, but the campground was not real big, so they couldn't be super far from each other either. All right, so here's the night vision monocular, and this comes into the story. This is a classic. So this story happens like, it must have been around 2010 or so, probably 10 or 12 years ago. It's 2022 right now that I'm telling the story. And my dad had got a night vision monocular similar to this one. My mom had given it to him for Christmas, I believe, just like that year or the year before. And so he had this new toy, and they are camping. Their motorhome is parked, under the, in the midst of the trees there in the campground, and I mean, it's pitch black. It's so dark. And it's about 2 a.m. And all of a sudden, my mom wakes up to this just wham, right on top of, right above their heads, right on top of their motorhome. And she wakes up, just startled, and what in the world was that, And so she's kind of sitting there for a minute, just laying there and trying to process what's happening. And my dad doesn't move. He doesn't stir. And it's about, 15, 20 seconds later or so, another wham, right above them. And I mean, they're parked under pine trees and stuff, but the pine cones aren't going to make that kind of a noise. And so she kind of shakes my dad, and hey, Bob, wake up. What, didn't you hear that? Wake up. My dad was in Vietnam. He was a helicopter gunner in Vietnam. And he lost about 90% of his hearing in his right ear as a result of a helicopter crash that he was in while in Vietnam. And lucky they all weren't killed, the guys in the helicopter. But he has about 90% hearing loss in that ear. So he sleeps with his left ear down usually, and so he can't hear anything out of that ear, or very little, when he's sleeping. And then because it's against the pillow, and then his right ear is up in the air, and he can't hear anything hardly out of that ear. So he doesn't hear any of this happening. And my mom is shaking him, wake up, Bob, what's going on? And he wakes up, what's happening, And she says, didn't you hear that? And he said, no, I didn't hear anything. And she told him what she had heard, a couple thuds, over the last 30 seconds or so. And he says, all right, I'll go check it out. So he grabs his, he puts on his sweats and gets down, from up above there where they were sleeping. And he grabs his night vision monocular, which he brought with him. And he always carried a pistol with him, when they would go places, camping and stuff. You just never know what you're going to run into, but you just for precaution. So he grabs his pistol, and he goes outside. This is a picture, of course, of the daylight and daytime but it's in the campground at No Name Lake, and so he's in this kind of atmosphere, this kind of terrain, but it's pitch black. So he goes over, he's standing by a tree, and there's tons of trees you can see, and he pulls out the night vision monocular and he looks around the campground, and there's nothing out of the ordinary that he can see. Everything looks fine, and the old guy in the tent's not stirring around and throwing things at their motorhome, and the young family's not doing anything. Doesn't look like they're doing anything. They're sleeping. So he's like, my dad's thinking, what in the world, what could have whacked the top of our motorhome like that? And so he's standing there looking around the campground and surveying the whole thing and doesn't see anything weird going on. Doesn't see anybody up and about. And so as he's standing there kind of surveying, he said he never saw it, but he felt it. Something comes flying past his ear, basically grazes the side of, pretty much grazes the side of his head and his ear. I mean, barely, but he felt it come by because it's totally dark outside, and he hears this big thud as this thing that almost, if whatever flew by him, he's thinking, would have hit him, between the eyes, he'd have been dead. And he hears this thud behind him, and he turns around, and it's a big old rock. He estimates it's about the size of a baseball that had hit the tree behind him. That's what grazed basically the side of his head and his ear. And yeah, for sure, if that thing would have hit him flush in the head, it would have been over. He says it wasn't just lobbed in. It wasn't, a lollipop coming in like a lazy fly ball off a baseball bat. This thing was a laser coming in. This was a fastball flying in. And now, of course, almost having just potentially died, okay, his, the spider senses go up, and he goes behind a tree, and he's, for cover, and he's looking out the night vision binocular again. He's got his gun out, and, somebody is out there throwing rocks at him and throwing them like Major League Baseball pitcher speed at him, and so he's looking around and he can't see anything out of the ordinary. He's looking over to the west, and it's just nothing's moving in the brush. There's nobody out and about. Looked straight to the north. It's just trees and shrubbery and brush and thick brush, but he can't see anything out of the ordinary there either. Nothing to the east. And he is just bewildered. What in the world? And as he's standing there behind the tree, protecting himself now, after, I don't know, about 30, 45 seconds, he estimates, looking around the campground, doesn't see anybody up and about, nothing, no funny business is going on, but another rock comes flying in and hits another tree behind him. Same size rock, same speed, and he's like, what in the world is going on? And so he stays out there for a few more minutes. The blood's pumping, the heart's pumping, right? And he what's going on here? And he stays out there for a few more minutes. He looks through the binoculars. He can't see anything weird happening. Doesn't see any person. Doesn't see any beast. Doesn't see anything. Okay. And after a few minutes, he goes back in the camper. And my mom's, what was that? And he says, well, nothing to worry about. I'll tell you in the morning. He didn't want to spook her. He didn't want to freak her out. So they go back to bed. And it takes a lot to get my dad rattled. Having been a helicopter gunner, he's seen a lot, and he doesn't get freaked out too easily. But he even said he was pretty freaked out. Okay, but they go back to bed. When they got up in the morning, he told her what had happened. And she said, you've got to be kidding me. That's just crazy. And he said, I know. I don't know what it was. I don't know what the heck was going on. But he said, I could have died. A rock came flying right past my head, right past my ear. I felt the thing, basically. And then another rock comes flying in. And my mom says, my goodness, what are we going to do? And my dad says, well, if we happen to see the park ranger, or, we'll tell him about it. But, there's one park ranger, or at least there used to be, up in that area for numerous lakes. And so you didn't see the park rangers very often. So they happened to actually run into the guy, though, that day. He was at No Name Lake. That was his day to be there at that lake, I guess, the park ranger. And so my dad told him what happened. And the guy says, that's interesting. He said, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I certainly don't know what was throwing the rocks in. But he said, we've had a few reports up here over the last, few years in and around this area, and at some of the different lakes too, of stuff like this happening. And and my dad and the ranger kept talking, and of course they were saying, well, there's black bears up in the area, and there's deer, and there's maybe some elk and maybe some moose even. But bears and deer and elk and moose don't throw things. They're not known for throwing. You don't see deer throwing rocks or throwing things. But there is one type of animal that does throw things and is very well known in nature to throw things when it feels threatened or when it wants to get things, people or other things out of its territory, and that is apes. Apes are very well known. That's very established that they throw things when they don't want something else in their territory. So was it an ape? Was it Sasquatch, Bigfoot that was doing that? Who knows, right? I mean, we'll never know what the thing was. But again, deer and elk don't throw things, but apes do. And so I like to think that maybe there was a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, up at No Name Lake, and that my dad had that encounter with it. Who knows? But interesting to think about.